Hello everyone, welcome to the Miss Stories and enjoy watching. The coffee Valentina had ordered from the train station cafe was the usual 3-in-1 from a bag. She did not like it, but at least this drink was hot and sweet. What she needed right now. Holding the scalding cup in her hands, she grinned to herself. That was how it was. It was today, February 14, that she was here again, in this city, and accidentally ran into Oleg, her ex-husband, near the mall where she had come on business. And exactly 7 years separate her from that day, which turned her life upside down. Valya, hello? Oleg's voice sounded perhaps too casual for such an unexpected meeting. Hello, she replied, trying to remain calm. Are you here on business? Business. Well, yes, how are you? Where are you now? She answered his questions, surprised at the smoothness of her voice. Only once she made a slip, probably because of her confusion. She told him the city where she lived now. Oleg offered to sit in a nearby pizzeria, but Valya refused, citing lack of time. And only one last question almost caught her off guard. Do you regret that you never forgave me? A little quieter than he spoke before, asked Oleg. All past, why now rake up the past? She avoided answering and hastily said goodbye, got into a cab, which in general, she did not need. Then, she did not want to remember what had happened then at all. But memory stubbornly brought Valya back to that night of Valentine's Day. In the afternoon, she called her husband and made an appointment for a romantic meeting after work in a small cafe near the house. Oleg, with sincere sadness in his voice, replied that he had already scheduled important talks and that dinner would have to be postponed. Valentina was not particularly upset. She understood that her husband was a busy man and a successful businessman. And yet on this day, which had become a special day for her, she wanted to be with him a little, to tell him the incredible news of which she had been dizzy since morning. After work, Valya stayed a little longer. She decided to sit with the documents. She walked home. She wanted to reflect on her changing life and her new status in general. She was a few dozen meters away from her favorite cafe when she felt that she had lost her shoe. Sitting down on the bench, a woman looked at the injured heel with regret. And when she looked up, she saw Oleg's car stopped in front of the cafe. He walked around the car, opened the passenger door and offered his hand to the charming girl in a light, just weightless white coat. Taking a few steps on the sidewalk, they, laughing, began to kiss. Valya remained seated on that bench, as if chained. Strange thing, she did not think about anything, just sat and watched the doors of the cafe, behind which the happy couple disappeared. Then, feeling cold, she stood up and wandered towards the house. And only after crossing the threshold, which she had considered native until that moment, I sat down and cried. Then there was the divorce, a quick, hasty divorce. Oleg desperately apologized, but Valentina, having given up on family life, did not think about forgiveness. She just went to her hometown, stopping any communication with her ex-spouse. There remained a parental apartment, a couple of years before Valentina's mother died. But even in his native city, Valya did not feel safe, so quickly sold real estate, moved to an aunt with no family in the neighboring region, bought a decent place, and began to get used to the new life. Valya and Oleg studied together. She had been sighing over a handsome schoolmate for 10 years ever since she saw him in the ruler of the first grade. And he paid no attention to the skinny, snub-nosed girl, whose only virtue was the incredibly thick and long braid. However, in grade 8, succumbing to the trends, the girl said goodbye to long hair, giving preference to a square cut. This haircut suited her better. At Valya, classmates and older guys began to look at, but she seemed to not notice their interest, still thinking only about Oleg. This enthusiasm for her was no longer a secret to anyone. At first, the girls, chuckling, began to call her among themselves Street Valentine, for the endless devotion that was read in her views directed at Oleg. And soon this nickname stuck firmly to the girl, and no one else called her. Valya had no hope of reciprocity. Oleg was promised a great future, a prestigious university, because he was a brilliant student and had very influential by the standards of their district center parents. She, a girl from a simple family, had only B's and A's in her diary, but she was not very active in her studies or social life. She was just a quiet and diligent student, an ordinary student in a word. And for this young man needed a girl with special virtues. Everyone around was sure of this. It is fair to say that Oleg was not a womanizer, did not fool girls, was a really decent and responsible young man. Everything changed this summer after graduation. It so happened that both Valya and Oleg lost people close to them at about the same time. After a long illness, Valya's father died. Oleg lost both of his parents. They crashed their newly bought car. The whole class came to support the boy at the funeral. The kids came up to him in a confused and sympathetic manner, hugged him, patted his shoulders, which he did not pay much attention to. And only Valya, herself a couple of weeks earlier, had bid farewell to her father, cried, leaning on Oleg's shoulder. Perhaps grief brought them closer. After his parents' funeral, Oleg abandoned the idea of entering the capital's universities, where he had already applied. He decided to go into the army. Valya entered, as she had planned, the Faculty of Economics at one of the regional universities. They wrote touching letters to each other. After 2 years of service, the young man came to his bride. A wedding was celebrated. How happy they were then. A rented house, the eternal lack of money, her husband's first attempts at business, and then his first successes. The first car, the first apartment, the first trip abroad on vacation. They lived in the same breath. They were truly one, needing each other every minute, not parting even for a day. Year after year flew by like that. The couple celebrated their 10th anniversary in their hometown because Valya's mother had a complicated surgery and she needed care. One day, an elderly woman asked her son-in-law why they were in no hurry to have children. "Yes, we are somehow not up to it," said Oleg, but the first time I think he wondered, why are they still alone? Valentina secretly worried for a long time. She knew that all this time she did not protect herself. But God apparently had his own plans for the family. The couple went through a long period of examinations, searches of new medical luminaries, each of whom convinced them of their absolute 100% reproductive health, and said with impotence, such curious cases do occur. Convinced that nothing depended on them anymore, husband and wife accepted this state of affairs, placing a taboo on any conversation on the subject. Valentina was painfully envious of her friends' children growing up, and sometimes she caught her husband's eyes on the children playing in the sandboxes, but she could do nothing about it. One day she calmed down and stopped worrying that she was a waste of time. She went to work. Although the position of the wife of a successful businessman did not require such heroic efforts, they were already living more than well. But the world of numbers and calculations, which she loved, allowed her to distract herself from everyday life and forget about some of her inferiority or something. Then, 7 years ago, in February, Valentina suddenly realized that for several days in a row, she had been plagued by some strange discomfort in the morning, weakness, dizziness. With a sinking heart, the 35-year-old woman bought some of the most expensive and accurate, as promised in the summary tests. She stayed home late on Valentine's Day on a plausible pretext. I saw my husband off to work and reverently closed myself in the bathroom. Each of the tests gave Valya 2 bright lines. There was no doubt. She was pregnant. That was the news she wanted to tell her husband at dinner. But she hid, faced with his treason. Settling in after the sale of parental apartments in a new place, Valentina had exactly on time to give birth to a healthy, plump baby girl who she called Pauline. Daughter grew up absolutely problem-free child, a good sleep and eat, little and easily sick, was developed beyond her age and very cute, is every feature reminiscent of Oleg. She inherited her hair only from her mother, which was thick, long, and unbelievably beautiful. While pregnant, Valentina realized that her savings for a long time will not be enough, that we need a reliable source of income, which also allows to be at home with the child. She decided to solve this problem in an absolutely unconventional way. She opened an online store. As the goods, she offered a variety of handmade products, both her own from childhood she loved to knit, and other people fond of needlework, with whom she became acquainted in social networks, in groups of interest. Soon her store gained a certain popularity. The income from it was stable and more than covered all the needs of the small family. The boon of handmade goods, clothes, jewelry, toys, furnishings, and much more was at the peak of popularity. And now Valya had received an offer from a large retail chain to cooperate in real life. And that was why she had come to this city, with which she had so many memories. "I know to find you here. There's no other train in your direction today." She suddenly heard Oleg's voice, which made her flinch and spill her coffee on the table. A few drops got on her coat. "I didn't expect to see you again today," she said, trying to get rid of the stains with some paper towels. It was a futile exercise, so Valya apologized and went into the bathroom, taking her purse. She did not remember about the phone lying on the table. After 10 minutes, brought into relative order as a coat and her thoughts, Valya returned. "I did not recognize Oleg. He was sitting at the table, pale, with trembling lips, and held her phone, tapping a melodious ringtone, which was set to incoming from his daughter. On the screen glowed an excellent quality photo of a smiling Palinka. Valentina snatched the phone from her ex-husband's hands and tried to turn off the call, which she had no luck with. Her hands also trembled with a nasty little shiver. Having somehow managed to cope with the censor, she dolefully lowered herself in front of Oleg. "Daughter, I have a daughter," he said, either asking or stating the obvious. How could you hide this from me?" She was silent, because she was not ready for such a conversation. "Of course, Valya, I was mean back then. But I punished myself. I live alone. All these temporary girlfriends do not erase the memory of you, no matter how hard I try. But the girl, my daughter, why is she growing up without a father? Why did you punish her? What kind of story did you come up with? A pilot father? Or a polar hero who died in the ice? Why, Kalenka, why?" Not a single word crossed Valentina's mind. Not a single word that she could somehow use to explain herself to Oleg. And only the distinct understanding that she had never been able to stop loving him all this time was growing in the woman's mind. "You can argue all you want, but I'm going with you," firmly said Oleg, and then added softer, even with tenderness, "Oh, you, Valentine?" And the woman smiled. No one had called her that for a long time.